From the 1011 Now streaming studio in Lincoln, Nebraska, this is the REPORT Husker Show, sponsored by Fat Dog's Convenience Store.
Welcome in, everyone. Bill Rentschler in the 1011 Now streaming studio. 1011 After Dark and REPORT Husker Show with Sports Director Kevin Suits after Nebraska tops Colorado 28-10 in an electric game in Memorial Stadium. Kevin, you were there. You were in the building. Was it as electric in the building as it looked like on the television?
Yeah, I'm worried that the television didn't quite capture how electric it was. I mean, because it's even hard to describe like what the energy is like. It's difficult, like putting all the words together to say, like, no, there was just a different feel about it. And students were chanting an hour before kickoff, and anytime Colorado did anything during pregame warmup, they're yelling, and then opening toe meets leather for the opening kickoff, and the energy, it just increased, and it had a lot of high pitches, and then a couple, and then third, and then like Nate Rohr, holy moly, he fed into the crowd like with the third and long or third and seven, whatever it is, and it was as vibrant of an atmosphere that I can remember covering Nebraska football. Really, in 21 years. There have been moments where it is really loud. I think of 2015 against 2016 against Michigan State, 2015 against Oregon, 2010 against Oklahoma. They all had in the Miami game 2014. Like they had moments.
But this was
consistently throughout the game. The beginning, crazy. Like it was crazy. And we'll get to the actual football, but I'm trying to just describe what the atmosphere was like because I think that might be the biggest takeaway for a lot of folks that were in the stadium tonight. Yeah. During pregame, like our media workroom, field level, is kind of tucked around the corner and it's pretty insulated. But anytime somebody came in, the door would open for a brief second. And in that 1 or 2 seconds, you could hear like just a buzz, and you got a quick like glimpse of the energy outside.
Yeah.
And the door closes, and you're back to work, and it's quiet.
Quiet again.
But then once you walk out and you're there to stay for the game, it was like, this is the real deal. And I think there were a lot of people there, Bill. And those sidelines were jam-packed. There was national media there. There were a ton of former Nebraska players. There were some A-listers in attendance really close to the field. And they're all taking videos and pictures. So even people that go to pretty notable events regularly, I think that they all have a takeaway of that. That was pretty next level.
And for the actual football team's part, sometimes there can be that atmosphere and things maybe don't start the greatest. But this was right out of the gate. I think 3 and out, touchdown drive, pick six, boom, boom, boom. And it's even more electric.
Yeah, it got ramped up. It started ramped up. It got turned up even a little bit more because Nebraska's 3 and out to start the game. A quick strike march down the field. Dylan Rilo looked really good to start the game. And then the Tommy Hill pick six. All of a sudden, it's 14-0 Nebraska. And that was probably the biggest moment of the day. Or like that's when I guess you would say the stadium pulse was at the highest.
Decibels were the highest
on the meter. It did maybe drop off a little bit in the second half. I think people were just getting restless at the end because the outcome was already determined. However, the officials drug the game out a little bit. There were several flags in the fourth quarter. There were multiple reviews. There were some questionable, was it a targeting call? Was it not? Mm-hmm. So they went to the booth a couple of times to look at those. But people were still there, 92,000 plus. No one left early because they wanted to rush the field and see what the scene was like at the end,
And the students did. It was mostly just the students, though. It was
the students that rushed the field. And, rushing the field, let's put it in context. It wasn't everyone that could possibly get on the field got on the field, and the goalpost stayed upright. Typically rushing the field it's a mob scene. You can't move, and the goalposts come down. That was not the case. In beating Colorado, you can debate yes or no whether students should have gone onto the field. But I think it speaks to the fact that this is a fan base and a program that has just been waiting so long to capture a big moment. And tonight, I believe, would qualify as a big moment.
Yeah, especially, again, if you think, those students are 18 to 22 years old. They haven't really known a lot of good Nebraska football. And, again, I would say tonight was probably some of the best Nebraska football we've seen in a while.
The first half, no question.
First half, definitely no question. It was dominated, again, probably by defense for Nebraska. 6 sacks, 10 tackles for loss. Shadur Sanders looked really uncomfortable for really most of that game. He's still an outstanding quarterback. He still made a ton of great plays. Travis Hunter still went for over 100 yards, but it was a pretty quiet, I feel like, 100 yards.
Travis Hunter went over 100 yards?
10 catches, 110 yards.
I still think Tommy Hill did a really good job on Travis Hunter.
He did.
Maybe the tape will say differently when Nebraska watches it back, but I feel like Travis Hunter, he only had 1 or 2 big plays, and on third downs and moments where you figured he was getting the ball, he didn't get the ball. And a big reason of that was the play of Tommy Hill on the back end. So I think maybe the headline with Tommy Hill is going to be the pick 6, but overall, how about just limiting Travis Hunter? And what Horn finished with?
He had
3 catches for 26 yards.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good for John Butler and his secondary.
The secondary did an outstanding job. And, the 6 sacks, that's pretty impressive. And they were by different guys. But I think part of the reason the sack numbers are so good is because of the coverage on the back end.
I would say, and John Bullock and Mekhi Bear, they had themselves a heck of a game tonight. Mekhi Bear, unfortunately, got the targeting call, and he'll have to sit out the first half against Northern Iowa. But he had a bunch of plays, a couple tip passes. John Bullock himself, I think when Colorado got down inside the 10, he had a tip ball and made an open field tackle and kind of kept Colorado bottled up.
Yeah, Mekhi Bear finishes with 6 tackles, 1 TFL, and at one point in the game when the Blackshirts were definitely taking control of that game in the second quarter, I believe, I said to somebody near me that I think we all see why Nebraska paid Tony White what they paid him in the offseason.
Yeah, he's definitely
the real deal. Like he had
dollars.
That defense ready to go, an outstanding scheme, bringing pressure, being creative with the way that they were coming in at different angles. And keep in mind, Nebraska defensively showed nothing last week against UTEP.
I believe it was a 0% blitz rate against UTEP.
So the pass rush they had against UTEP was the front 4, or the front 3 in this instance. But he was just being creative with how to line guys up and attack different angles. And also, I thought the tackling on the back end was pretty good as well. Isaac Gifford, Deshaun Singleton, guys really stuck their nose in there. And Nebraska was hitting hard tonight. And I think that was part of the game plan going up against this Colorado team was, let's be physical with them. And that's not just in the trenches and at the line of scrimmage. Anytime that they're in space, let's get after them.
So Dylan Raiola finished 23 for 30, only $185, 1 touchdown, no interceptions, protected the ball. Last week against UTEP, he was throwing a lot of deep balls. Threw a couple in tonight's game, but it felt like he really managed this game very efficiently.
Yeah, I think his numbers could have been better, too, if there weren't a few flags that flew in the second half. There's a long pass play to Ja'Cory Barney Jr., which got called back because of a holding penalty. But the turnover thing, no interceptions, no fumbles today. Nebraska's through 2 games of the season with 1 turnover. And Matt Rule said time and time again during the offseason, we just have to protect the rock. And Nebraska was almost dead last in college football a season ago in turnover margin. And was it minus 17?
Plus 3 now.
Yeah, they're in a pretty good spot. So clearly an emphasis of that in the offseason is now paying off. In the one time that they turned the ball over, Bill, it was against UTEP, and it was the fumble at the goal line, which then turned into a safety. So it's really no harm done with the one time they gave the ball away.
And that person who fumbled it was Dante Dowdell. Again, he got taken out of the game. Probably would have finished with over 100 yards rushing in that game, but he toted the rock 17 times tonight. He was clearly their lead guy, went for 74 yards and 2 touchdowns, and Ramir Johnson was right there. Again, they had 4 guys, but they really kind of honed in on 2 guys tonight.
Yeah, Dowdell got into a bit of a rhythm. That first touchdown run, that 11-yard touchdown, that was pretty nice. That was a mean run.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you ever watched the NFL Network's Angry Run segment. Like, that had a little bit of angry runs in it because it was straight north and south, and he was determined to get into the end zone. And, I mean, plus, I think part of that running mentality was, one, who they're playing, two, that's how they want to run the football. But three, I'm sure Dante was probably feeling the energy of the stadium. Mm-hmm. And even my one-on-one interviews tonight with MJ Sherman and Micah Mazuka, they both said that they heard it all. They felt it all. And they were shouting out the crowd for playing a role in the outcome of tonight's game.
It was it was electric the whole night. Ramir Johnson, he had a good night rushing, 9 rushes for 33 yards, but he had 8 catches tonight. He was actually the leading receiver in terms of catches, 49 yards. And again, you kind of knew things were really going Nebraska's way when the one throw over the middle that probably should have been intercepted ends up in Ramir Johnson's hands, and he ends up in the end zone.
And that's a pretty big score too, because Nebraska led at halftime. Was it 21-0 at halftime?
I think it was 28-0.
28-0.
Yeah.
That was the score that made it 28-0. So the game's, I mean, I don't know how many times in college football a team's come back from a 28-point deficit at halftime. You can hear a bit. 3 touchdown score, that's possible. You got to chip away in the third quarter and make your move then. But 28, you're on the meter of this thing can get really out of control. So that was an important score in that ball game.
I kept waiting for something bad to happen because that's kind of been the vibe, over the past several years. And then that play happened, and I was like, that's the thing that would have been the bad thing, but it's kind of breaking our way. And I kept waiting for the bad thing.
Kind of feels different. You almost don't know how to. You almost don't know how to behave when things.
You don't.
When the breaks go your way instead of it going the other way.
Well, and then I think it was Jimmy Horn. There was the play right on the sideline. They called him out, but then they reviewed it. The TV announcers were pretty upset. They thought it should have been a catch, but they did not overturn that call. And so again, it was strange. As a Husker fan who's been through a lot over the past 5 to 10 years, it was a little bit strange. So. Are the Huskers ranked come this Sunday, do you think? Again, there were a lot of teams in that 18 to 25 that did lose today.
Well, college football is kind of weird today.
It was.
Iowa lost. Notre Dame lost. Michigan didn't look very good. Mm-hmm. Are the Huskers ranked? Good question. They'll be in consideration. I don't know that they will be. I think they're going to be near the top of the teams receiving votes.
Okay.
Because I think the jury's still out a little bit on Colorado. The team that played in the first half, that's a top 25 team.
Oh, yeah.
No doubt.
Oh, yeah. If that would have
that's a team that's going to win a lot of games this year.
Yeah.
The team in the second half, middle of the pack Big Ten team.
Yeah. So next week is Northern Iowa.
But if I'm Matt Rule, you come away with this 18-point win, you're not happy that you didn't max out and play to your potential in the second half. But, man, that should kind of eat at your boys. And you can go back in the film room and get after them and say, listen, if we're not sharp, if we're not crisp, we've got this deficiency. We're not good here. This must get better. So there's an element of that second half can really be used as a tool to keep this team hungry. And it does expose some things that they definitely need to address. The penalty yardage with over 100 yards penalties, that's not good.
12
Plus
penalties, 105 yards.
They had some big plays called back. And again, 28-10, that could very well be 42-10.
Could have been. Really could have been.
Because Nebraska in the second half, they only had they didn't score in the second half. And you thought they did, but they didn't.
Johnson had a 70-yard run called back. The refs in the second half were not great.
And the fans standing behind me in the south end zone made sure that the refs knew that he didn't approve of some of the calls they were making.
They were probably going to get out of town pretty
And there was, speaking of the fans, not that we haven't done that enough already, but there was one fan at the beginning of the game who was on the north side of the end zone, or just beyond the north end zone. Bill, I don't know how, I don't want to emulate and do exactly what he did because I have a mic in front of me. He did this nonstop. Ah! And one of the gentlemen standing next to me, he looked and said, he's got to stop some point, right? I go, no, I don't know that he has to.
He's probably still in the rail yard right now doing it.
He probably will not have a voice for the next week And he's not the only one.
Yeah.
Like, there was just consistent noise.
So I feel like the whole team should buy Ja'Cory Barney something really nice. He's had, I think, 4, 5, maybe 6 plays this year where he pops it for 20, 30, 40, 50 yards, and he gets called back with the penalty.
He's electric, though.
Oh, my gosh. Every time he touches the ball, it's just like...
He's got a little bit, for me, he's got a little bit of... It's either like J.D. Spielman or DeMornay Pearson-Ell in him.
DeMornay Pearson-Ell.
Like a guy that can just... If you get the ball to him in space, I mean, their feet move so quick.
It's like he's covered in grease.
Yeah, and he's pretty slippery. Maybe DPE would be a better comparison for Ja'Cory. And he did some things in the spring season that the media members saw, and Matt Rule continued to praise Ja'Cory because he was fresh on campus and no one really knew too much about him. So this coaching staff's been a big fan of Ja'Cory Barney ever since he arrived back in January. He's continued to get better, and he's part of this freshman class that they're all pretty tight. So, and you get the sense that Dylan Raiola has a lot of trust in him as well.
Yeah, he's targeted multiple times tonight. Didn't see Carter Nelson get really any targets or play time, I think, today. Was kind of surprised by that. Thought we'd see him a little bit more, but I'm sure we might hear from Rule maybe next week, maybe as to that reasoning, or maybe from Sat on Tuesday when we get a chance.
But they got the beyond Carter Nelson, they got those tight ends. I know Nelson's at receiver right now, but they got those tight ends involved today. Even a couple times they had like Lingenfelter split out wide. It's like 44 way. It's all part of what they're doing, like they're dragging them across. And, Fedonia's targeted, had a nice catch. Nate Borkacher had a good catch over the middle. Again, just distributing the football. What'd you say? Raiola finished
23 for 30, I think.
23 for 30. That'll play all day. No interceptions will play every single game.
And no even like fumbles. The ball never hit the turf once from any running back, receiver, or anything.
Did you catch during the news? Sorry to cut you off, Bill, but
No.
Did you catch during the news when I was talking to Micah Mazuka how he just so casually dropped in like, yeah, we're trying to get into the playoff. Like, but that's the mentality of this team.
Yeah.
They believe they're good. Matt has said all along, this team's pretty good.
Yeah.
And the players believe that they're good. And they know that the ceiling for the team is pretty high.
Well, and he said it.
And so for them to be talking about playoff after 2-0, and they're not looking past it. I mean, shoot, MJ Sherman didn't even know who they play next week. He's like, I think it's Northern Iowa, He called them North Iowa. He doesn't even know because they're so focused one game at a time. But as they outline like what they're trying to accomplish and where they're trying to go, they know if they go 1-0 every week,
it adds up.
It does.
What did MJ Sherman say? Stacking days and stacking games is what he said?
Stacking days, stacking games.
Yeah. And, I mean, you go back to the preseason, Rule talked a lot about, like, hey, if we go to the playoff, you make it to the championship, that's a 16-game season. And, it's kind of like a whatever comment in the preseason, but now it's like, oh, geez. Maybe they're, Kirk Herbstreit on College Game Day this morning saying they'll be 7-0 going to Ohio State. So, again, the national media had been kind of looking over, seeing what's going on over there, and again, they put their best foot forward tonight, both for everyone to see, primetime game. I'm sure, I know there was a ton of recruits at the game tonight.
It was a who's who before the game. It was like everyone and their brother was there, and it was a who's who. It was nice to see the balloons back inside the stadium. Fans didn't have to hold them very long.
No,
they got to release them pretty early because the first touchdown came within, the first 6 minutes of the game? 5 minutes. It was scored at 4.5 minutes into the ball game.
Yeah.
So the balloons were flying. That was fun. There was still some that kind of lingered around in the second half and just kind of took you back in time a little bit because that was such a staple of Nebraska football for years on years. And one of my other favorite lasting images of the night, Bill, was, after the students rush the field and there's all the hugging and celebrating and dancing and all that stuff, Dylan Raiola is walking off the field, and he's got a couple of players serving as his bodyguards and then a couple actual bodyguards. Like, everybody's walking with Dylan, and he looks up at the crowd, puts both arms in the air, and he does that, like, bring on the noise. Like, that's pretty cool.
He's got the machine.
Yes, there's a little bit of swagger there. It hasn't crossed the line of cockiness either, in my opinion. I feel like it's just a competent player having a lot of fun, and being a leader, and I've talked about this multiple times, the thing that really impresses me about Dylan Raiola so far is the leadership that he shows with this team. Against UTEP, that first touchdown, right after they scored and the offense comes off the field and the PAT unit goes out and they kick the PAT, Raiola goes running onto the field. And at this point, you're like, what? Why the PAT? He was running to like the 5-yard line to give everybody that was on the PAT unit a high five. And he's consistently done that. Even tonight, multiple times. Like he's already got his helmet off. He's already been to the sideline. But he's the first one to greet like these special teams units and celebrate with these guys after they do their job. And it is just so far past what most freshman college football players do. He just has some of the it factor and the leadership qualities he has at a young age are pretty remarkable.
Yeah, the hype around him, again, obviously in the preseason, everyone wanted to see it on the grass in a real game. Now we've seen it twice. Again, before today, I was like, I just don't know. But now it's like, yeah, I'm all in on this team.
And Dylan's getting really comfortable in front of the media as well.
Bladed his 60 degree.
What's that?
He bladed his 60
I
degrees.
mean, that's a fun little anecdote. And then he even says, like, I don't know how many golfers are in here. Like he just is comfortable.
Yeah.
And then he drops that little quote about, he just wanted to see his dad amongst all the people after the game. And then he found him, and all his dad said is, we're still undefeated against Colorado. And Dylan said something to the effect of, like, that's all you got for me? But he's being playful and giving us good insight and also answering some nice football questions. Yeah. And I think he has a pretty good level of respect toward the reporters that cover Nebraska football. Yeah. So if you follow Nebraska history and if you've followed the program closely over the past, 15, 20 years, he's a player that some people might say he seems a little too good to be true. And right now he's delivering, and he is meeting all the expectations and quite possibly exceeding them.
Yeah, I would agree. So next Saturday, 6:30 kick, Northern Iowa. Again, this is a game that, again, you think they wouldn't have any trouble with. But, again,
now, see, you're just saying it like, yeah, no big deal.
It shouldn't be. Again, I say that Notre Dame.
This is college football, Bill.
Penn State, I think, was also a 35-point favorite over Bowling Green. They only won by a touchdown.
Yeah, they're lucky they won that game.
They are lucky they won that game.
Kansas State almost got beat by Tulane today.
That was a good game.
I mean,
Arkansas and Oklahoma State was a good game.
I know it was in Northern Iowa, but got to go 1-0. Stacking days, stacking games.
That's right, and that's exactly what we are going to do. But it is late, Kevin. It is 12:30 now, so
still not my bedtime.
Yeah. So we're going to continue to have more coverage of this game, and again, the 1994 championship team was back. Frank Solage was back. He got honored, so there's still a ton of stuff to talk about.
Bud Crawford led the team onto the field.
That was super cool. He had his belt, but I think that's actually Nebraska's turnover belt, isn't it?
Oh, I don't know.
WWE, I think it was a half dozen or so teams belts, and I think Nebraska was one of them.
Yeah, we know one thing about Nebraska. They do big events very well. Tonight was a big event, and some of those other things that they incorporated were pretty cool. Yeah. The 94 team, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that was and it seemed like the entire team was here. Like, everybody, it seemed like, was here for the game tonight. And, of course, after they did their tunnel walk, they extended the tunnel for the Nebraska players to run through. So they're all, high-fiving the guys. It's like, no, they should be high-fiving you. It's such a weird complex. No, you're the 94 guys, they're the legends. Yeah. And they're, giving the players.
You guys started the tunnel walk.
Yeah, exactly. So that was neat. There were supposed to be parachuters, some guys, skydivers that were going to land on the field at halftime of the game. That did not happen tonight. I saw them during warm-ups. I'm not sure why it didn't happen. I have some theories on it. I don't want to go public with them, but nothing bad.
Wasn't the weather?
It was not. It was not the weather. It was a gorgeous night.
The one thing I want to add is I was pretty disappointed in the NBC broadcast. They really didn't show much of any of the between the third quarter and fourth quarter light show, the drone show. It was just a very brief, couple seconds as they came back to the broadcast. Okay,
so the light show, it's a little different this year. They still do Thunderstruck, but not as much Thunderstruck. It started with just some song, and then like everybody got their phones out, and then they started like flashing the lights at Memorial Stadium, and then they go dark, and then they have the pyrotechnics. Now, in years past, I remember Nebraska's players to really get caught up in that, and then they start dancing along to Thunderstruck, and they're very involved in the song and with the fans. Tonight they didn't. Like you saw them look around, but I was waiting to try to get video of some of the players dancing and like being involved with the song and the scene, but they didn't. I mean, the most you got was a couple of head bops, but nobody really went too crazy.
Huh.
So that was just different.
Sounds like
they were locked in.
Like a Matt Rule thing.
Yeah.
Locked in. Well, again, we're going to have a ton more stuff. Chase will have more tomorrow in newscasts, in report and newscasts. And again, we'll start it all over again 1 week at a time, starting next week. Monday, we'll hear from Rule and get his breakdown after he's seen the tape.
Yeah. So the next three, we talk about the night game and the light show and all that stuff. Next two games are night games also.
Yep.
So they got 6:30 next week, and then the following week at 7 o'clock Friday against Illinois.
That will be what Kendall, I think, said in the early show tonight. 3 consecutive primetime games. I was like,
yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
When the last time Nebraska had 3 consecutive night games?
The record's pretty good in primetime.
Yeah, it is. All right, well, Kevin, it's late. You still got some work to do. I still got some work to do, so we'll let everyone go to bed. Appreciate you for jumping in.
Fun night.
What?
It was a fun night.
It was a fun night. It was a great night. So appreciate everyone for tuning in, watching. As always, keep it tuned to 1011, both on air and online, for all of your latest Husker coverage. Hope everyone has, I guess it's Sunday now, hope everyone has a nice Sunday.
You've been listening to the Report Husker Show, sponsored by Fat Dog's Convenience Store. Watch, listen, and stream on the 1011 Now app, on YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. For more Husker coverage throughout the week, watch the Report on 1011 Sports at 6 and 10 p.m. and download the 1011 Now app.